SJB?
Correct. Hi.
Introduce yourself.
Sure.
Sure.
My name's Adam Hatter. I'm a partner at SJB. We're presenting Eucalyptusdom today.
Okay, off you go.
Awesome. So Eucalyptusdom, this is kind of like the toenail to the last project. It's an incredibly small exhibition that we did for the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney. It was a collaboration between Rick LaPlastria, who's one of the doyens of Australian architecture, and our office, and a young First Nations architect who works in our office, Jack Gilmore-Johnson. And in that context, I should acknowledge that this project was delivered on Gadi land, which is the traditional lands of the Aboriginal people of Sydney, and pay my respects to their elders. This is the first fit-out that the Museum of Contemporary Art, the Powerhouse Museum, the Museum of Arts and Applied Sciences in Sydney did. And kind of interestingly, through the process of their history, they've moved from a very static museum to a very active museum. So taking these things that they used to make, which were quite beautiful, but they would sit there forever and never be changed. The exhibition itself was about the eucalyptus tree. It's very ubiquitous. In lots of countries in the world, it's seen as a weed and is not a particularly great plant. But in Australia, it's a plant that draws the entire population together because it exists across the entire continent of the country. The museum originally was tasked with finding industry out of the land. So when we were colonised by the British, they were trying to set up industry, and they were trying to work out how to use the natural resources of the country to a way to generate wealth. And so in the process of doing that, the museum itself was complicit in the destruction of vast swathes of the country and the landscape. And you can see here on the right-hand side of this image some of the species, the specimens that they took. They were cutting down trees that were thousands of years old to see what they could do with them, in inverted commas. And in that sense, they're complicit in the destruction of Aboriginal culture. And this project came about because the museum was having a kind of truth-telling session with itself about how do they start to reconcile some of the past wrongs that they did in terms of the country, the landscape and the Aboriginal people, and at the same time move forward as an institution. They have more than 3 million specimens of the eucalyptus in their collection, and that ranges from teacups painted with kind of drawings of eucalyptus trees through to the slabs of timber that you saw. Unfortunately, in the 1700s, we had early 1800s, we had an exhibition in Sydney in what was termed the Crystal Palace of Sydney, with all of the collection in it, and it burnt down. So the vast majority of a lot of that collection was lost forever, and there was a lot of incredibly important pieces for the Aboriginal people. So this is a kind of the start of this discussion about reconciliation, I suppose, between their role in the destruction and their role moving forward. When we think about an exhibition like this, we have to kind of think about two things. One, how do we make an exhibition that has a responsible position around sustainability, so it's not just kind of ripped out, it's a kind of 6-month program that it's going to be used for, and at the same time create an exhibition design that talks to the intent of the exhibition without overwhelming the exhibition. This is a floor plan. On the right-hand side is the outdoor space, so the kind of entry courtyard, and this is a garden space that was designed for the exhibition to house, I suppose, or deify in a little way, trees. And on the right-hand side, the kind of idea of the piers and the way in which they sit within that space. We designed a section of a kind of prototype of these, and these were used to say, we didn't know what we were designing the exhibition for, I should say. The curators hadn't decided what they were going to put on show out of the 3 million pieces when we were designing it. So we had to create an infinitely flexible design. So this was the kind of process of thinking about, could we make something that could adapt to the curator's desire over the period of the exhibition and indeed beyond the exhibition. So Jack in our office, who's the First Nations architect, and I should say, being a First Nations architect in Australia, you're one of 10 people if you're registered, so he's a very important person in this process. He designed this system of the exhibition, and I think importantly, this is using Formply to make the exhibition basis, but the Formply is actually made out of eucalyptus trees themselves. So there's a kind of connection between the materiality that the powerhouse wanted to once do, which was find industry out of the material, and then in this instance use that kind of industry to kind of re-support the idea of what the powerhouse were doing. That allowed us to create this kind of platform and network to let the powerhouse then change their exhibition over the period of times of the project. In the forecourt, which was a really awful space in Sydney, there was the intent to create a space that was kind of like a palate cleanser, I suppose, before you enter the building. And that palate cleanser was to kind of show the landscape. We kind of take eucalyptus forests as being a bit ubiquitous. It's something that we kind of see all the time. And so we wanted to kind of celebrate that. And these are Rick Plastria's drawings of his intent of being in a eucalyptus forest, and they were used in the final exhibition and hung from the space, this kind of a sense of being both inside and outside the space itself. The deification, it was just after the major bushfires in Sydney, so you can see these 5 sentinels of that kind of history of the tree and the way it kind of survives through the fires themselves, and then this planting of the eucalyptus trees to try and show Australian people that they're actually quite an important tree when they grow everywhere. And then as you come into the building, that kind of is the palate cleanser, and then you come into this space, and in this diagram you can see hanging from the ceiling Rick's drawings, which are very light, very subtle, and they kind of moved with the air conditioning within that space. The space itself is an awful building, so the intent was to create the exhibition as being the focus and to push back the building that it sits within, and also to allow a visitor to wander through it at their pace. So this museum has people from toddlers through to centenarians, so we wanted to ensure that you could come and stay for as long as you want or as little as you want. There was also a collection of artists appointed for the exhibition, and those art pieces were kind of contemporarily investigating the idea of the tree. You can see here on the left-hand side some of those original specimens of eucalyptus, and then on the right an art piece designed by one of the artists. These beautiful First Nations sentinels from the north of Australia, from the Northern Territory, which are both funeral emblems but also art pieces. And then here some of the detailing around the system that we designed, which was intended to be removed and reused for other exhibitions, which they've flat packed this away to be used again. This was an exhibition piece by an artist who made a perfume out of the smell, and so that was kind of filling the space with this kind of sense of the spaces, a sense of the eucalyptus as well as the physicality of it. The exhibition itself, as I said, was about truth-telling, so it was very clear from the museum that they wanted to think about their way that they could decolonise, they could kind of deal with some of the truths about their complicit nature of the destruction of the landscape. This is an example of the size of some of the trees that they have had cut down for it. This was another artist installation in the space. And then as part of it, they invested heavily in a book with a lot of writing around the topic, around their involvement in eucalyptus and the kind of importance of eucalyptus to the kind of history of Australia and to the future of Australia. And that's the project.
It's a nice design, nice project. Can you tell me a bit more about the system of furniture you designed? Because flexibility was very important.
Yes.
Were you able to have all the flexibility you needed, or was there adjustment needed for specific exhibits?
Yeah, so if those slides come up again, I'll go back to one of them. But we were quite strict with ourselves about the proportion of those exhibitions, because the form ply comes in a certain size, so we didn't want to cut the form ply down and have to kind of rework it. So the entire exhibition is based on that grid structure of the form ply, even to the point where the sandstone blocks that were put outside were part of that dimensional relationship. It was 98% suitable, I suppose. There's kind of always 2% at the end where we needed to kind of make some adjustment to it. And to be honest, that was mostly around some reflectivity with the lighting to ensure that we could see through some of the Perspex boxes, that some of the pieces in the end were highly sensitive to light. So the kind of process of ensuring that like letters or pieces on paper weren't destroyed by the exhibition itself. So yeah, there was about 2% where we had to kind of tweak it, but fabulously they've taken it apart. It had no fixing, so it was all using the, I suppose, the physics around the geometry of the joint to hold it together, and then it's kind of taken apart and put away and to be reused again for another exhibition.
Can I just ask, in a similar way, I think, I was slightly reminded of Enzo Mari. You might know the kind of 1970s kind of Italian designer building from very simple pieces. Everybody could put together furniture pieces from a certain set. How much are you finding that trying to design for one system is limiting a bit what you can do, because you're trying to work with one joint, one piece of ply, compared to maybe saying, you would be doing it slightly differently, also from ply, but every time again? Yeah,
I mean, I think you kind of have to go into it understanding you won't solve the problems of everything on one thing, and you kind of, and in a way, the original plan that we had, we set that out for the exhibition design, for the curators, because there were 6 curators in this project, so it was important that the plan was early and gave them kind of strength, I suppose, in their capacity to be able to do whatever they wanted. There was a piano in the exhibition. There was Mawson's sled that he took to the South Pole, which is made out of eucalyptus. So the thing that we did very quickly was this plan that gave everybody a sense of this is how much you could do. Like, you couldn't really then say, I want a little bit more, a little bit less. It's like you either get the whole piece or none at all. And quickly the curators came to that position. They were like, they kind of worked with us on that. I mean, there's always a point where you think, oh, maybe we should take the path right and design another piece to enable a different componentry to come together. But I think acknowledging the restrictions of the module that we created was kind of actually empowered the curators to think about how they might then shift the curatorial position of the exhibition.
Tell us a little bit about the colour and nature. Obviously, eucalyptus is a living plant or tree. And I just thought there was a bit of a lost opportunity there. I know you were given all of these artefacts which you had to display. Yeah. But after seeing the advertisements around town and it all being very green, I imagined it was going to be a little bit more lush inside. Talk about why you chose to go, or was there green we didn't see?
No, I think the kind of, if I talk about this one for the beginning, it was kind of interesting in the end because the trees, the sentinel trees that had been burnt in the Blue Mountains bushfires, the actual bushfires happened over the period of which we were designing the exhibition, so we kind of didn't know it was happening until after it happened anyway. And the landscape architect, Craig, said, I want to bring some of these old pieces back and show, I suppose, the city people what's going on in the bush and show the kind of destruction that occurs. And it kind of was not lost on me that the kind of thing that held your space in the outdoor environment was the kind of blackness of these trunks against the greenness of the landscape. And then when you went inside, it was kind of almost the inverse of that the blackness was what held the space, the kind of lightness of the object, was what held the space, and the blackness became the background. I think we didn't make an active choice about having it to be black, I must say. The form ply comes with the black finish on it, so we did allow those junctions or those joints to touch through and be seen, so we didn't kind of want to refinish it. But yeah, I mean, the green in a way was part of the branding to get the public involved in the idea of the eucalyptus, because, you know, if you think about a eucalyptus tree, you think about the beautiful green of the leaves. You don't think of the blackness of the burnt. But at the period of time, we were very conscious of the bushfires and the destruction that had happened. So yeah, it's a kind of interesting observation.
I think it's quite nice actually without the green. It's sort of unexpected. I know we're talking about interiors, but I was kind of interested in this palette cleanser that you were talking about, this bit before you get in. And I guess with exhibitions, it's kind of an experiential thing, and it's almost the start and the end actually of someone coming in and going out. Could you just talk through a little bit more about how that works into the whole experience? Yeah. So this is the kind of space just before you get into the lobby, and the lobby then it feeds directly into the exhibition. And this was the kind of free space. This is the space where everyone could come and
for as long as I can remember, this has just been a paved brick space that no one spends any time in. By putting the sandstone blocks and some depth of soil and some trees in this space, it became used over the 9 months that the exhibition was on. And in a way, it fetishised the trees. It kind of showed Sydney-siders that eucalyptus trees are special, that there was something good about them because they are seen everywhere around the country in various different formats or different species. But it did allow people to feel the coolness of it. So you take this very hot space that faces the wrong direction and is really never used, and by putting the trees and a bit of grass, native grasses into this space, it cooled the space and actually gave people some reprieve from when they're kind of coming up and down Harris Street before they got into the exhibition. And the way at which it was used was really amazing, actually. Like school kids, this museum is visited by the most number of people in Sydney, in Australia. So, school groups would come and sit here before they came into the exhibition, and they would talk about what they were seeing or what they were doing, or about nothing particularly to do with the exhibition at all. But it gave them that space to rest and gave them the coolness, which was amazing.
I've got to squeeze my question into
yes.
the 1 minute left. I suppose I've got a comment more than a question, but I, of course, want to know what you think about this comment. If I was doing this exhibition about eucalyptus, I think I'd start the experience of the exhibition with something that evoked being up close to the trees and amongst the trees.
Yeah.
Now, I know you couldn't put a eucalyptus forest inside the exhibition space, but did it occur to you that it would be a good preparation? I mean, you've got the trees outside.
Yeah.
If I understand well, you've uprooted those burnt trees and just stuck them in the ground.
Yeah,
they don't have roots. They're not alive. They're
No.
kind of finito.
Correct. So there was.
But so what is missing is the many living trees.
Yeah. So in this external space, there was the 5 dead trees, which were literally dead. And then there was a group of living trees right next to them. So we had the kind of actual one. And then inside, so you can probably just see the actual green of the eucalyptus behind it. So it was kind of like the birth and the death of the one thing. Obviously, eucalyptus, you can't remove them in a scale. They don't transplant, so you actually have to grow every tree. You can't just pick up a beautiful big one and put it somewhere else. But I think importantly about the sense of the tree, the hanging fabric pieces were Rick's interpretation of being in the forest. And because the air conditioning moved somewhat slowly, and it was a little bit lighter than in these images suggest, but there was a sense of being in the forest. There was a sense of this vertical scale of those in that space, helped by those kind of vertical fabric pieces and drawings.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks.